be willing to throw it all away.
That's all there is to it.
And with violence, we don't want to say we're not sitting here like being like proponents of like, just go ahead and take everything by blood and flesh, But we're saying is that there is a time, there is a place, and there is a time for violence, just like there's a time for diplomacy.
Yep.
Just like there's a time for ignoring.
Yep.
You have to master that balance because that's what's gonna. I think that's what leads you to, being a person of principle. That's being someone that lays a legacy of greatness for their family and and future generations. Because what do you really pass on to your children? All that financial stuff that could come and go, but if you passing a mindset on, a mentality, a way of living for a young man or young woman, that goes further than any dollar amount.
Yeah.
Like if you instilled in someone integrity, hard work, ambition, and creativity, who knows where that's going to take them?
And in addition to that, I think that's why it come down to, as you just pointed out, understanding what you hold valuable. And that's another reason why when it comes to especially things I defend, like I would never name anything material. That's why even earlier I only named people. And it's because when you look at things and understand what you're willing to risk for them, you understand also how much they mean to you. Like we're sitting here making a podcast, and we're honestly not sitting here making this podcast because we built the freedom to be able to do it and say these things on our own. Technically, we're actually sitting here because of a civil war that shouldn't have had to happen in the first place, right? So if people understood that, collectively that people shouldn't be slaves, there wouldn't have had to be a civil war in the first place, right? So there's always that perpetuating issue that divides people to the point where it has to come to violence. Because the fact of the matter is, across the board, it should never have to come to violence. It shouldn't have took a civil war for people to realize that slaves should be free. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't have taken Kaepernick kneeling for people to realize that injustice is a problem. Like these are things that actually should never have to happen. If we collectively understood that this is an issue and we can agree on that, but everybody can agree on that for like multiple reasons, but usually primarily either from how they were brought up and what they believe, or because it's not happening to them. And to quote Muhammad Ali, and he said this perfectly in an interview, if it's 10,000 snakes coming at my house and 1,000 of them mean me no harm, I can't depend on that 1,000 to form a blockade to stop the other 9,000.
Yeah.
So it forces you into a situation where you got to react in a certain way where it's like, all right, how do I defend myself against a threat when I don't even completely know what a threat is? Because we're in a war of mindsets right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, like, especially like when I'm out and at work, like I heard somebody say, well, he had marijuana in his house. So yeah, I bet you right now I can go into suburbia and find some illegal substance in most homes. And it's not going to justify somebody coming in and gunning someone down. And that's really what it comes down to. Like if she went into his house, it still would have been wrong if she didn't have a warrant. And let's say she found marijuana and arrested him for whatever reason. But the man was alive. This would be a different situation. There's still been some laws violated there, as it often is, and people don't realize that. But I think this highlights the extent of what law enforcement is willing to do to make things seem right that are not. Because people always make it seem like, well, if you comply or if you do this, or if you do that. No, we live up under a completely different criminal justice system, and people don't realize it. But it actually exists. And that shouldn't be a reason that I need to instill in my son how to deal with certain situations. Instill in him what racism is or isn't. Like, I shouldn't have to teach these lessons to my son. But this is the world that we live in. And I would never tell my son, well, you know what, once this gets to this point, then violence is the only answer. I would rather teach him violence is never the answer. Which is why even now, and I mean, even as I mentioned previously, I'm more willing to perpetuate violence on his behalf and take the consequences than I am willing to allow him to commit violence. And that's a double standard. It really is. I'm telling you not to do something that you are about to witness me do. But at the same time, it's like, somebody did it for me way back when. It might have been my grandfather. It might have been, any number of people. But they sacrificed something for me to be here saying this. And we came a long way, but we still aren't where we need to be. Which means, the way I see it, to pay it forward, like I need to sacrifice or be willing to do a couple of things to make sure my son doesn't have to deal with certain stuff. Is that going to be the case? I don't know. But the fact is, and the whole point of what we're saying here is understand what you are willing to sacrifice. Because the difference is, I know what I'm willing to sacrifice. And there's a lot of people that think they're willing to sacrifice stuff, but aren't willing to sacrifice anything. And that's a whole nother issue. But you can't just be like, all right, I'm going to take this forever and then expect for change to happen. Change never happens in the comfort zone. And people don't realize that. The nation, whether we like it or not, is still, for the most part, comfortable. And before it gets better, I mean, whether people like it or not, it's going to get worse.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting to the point now where it's like, all right, people being gunned down. I hate to say it. Like this is the order that it's went in. People being gunned down actually isn't largely the issue. It went from people being gunned down to cops being called on black people for no reason. And then it went from that back to, now we just going to kill innocent people. Like, we're going to arrest and do whatever to innocent people. And most of the stuff that I've seen happen, excluding this one incident, hasn't even been by police officers. I've seen normal citizens gunning black people down and them walking because they fear for their lives or, whatever reason. Although you have video footage and everything else that people have in their hands up. So it's like, all right, if that's what you want to do, I realize, me personally, I'm a civil servant. Technically, by my job description, I'm a civil servant for the federal government. I know my job is to serve the people of the United States, no matter what capacity I'm working in. And that includes black people, white people, Mexicans, wherever you're from. That includes Black Lives Matter and the Ku Klux Klan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just what it is. And I'll say right now, because of the nature of my job, I defend any and everybody without question, because that's what the United States of America is. I'm not sitting here questioning what you do as long as it doesn't affect me. Do I gotta like it? No. I'm not defending my right to like or dislike something. I'm defending your right to do it. I mean, it's just the reality of it. I'm defending your freedom to be able to do so, just like anybody else that I work with. And I'm sure some of them probably the same way. They don't agree with me. They have their views. But at the end of the day, do I actually care what their views are? No, I don't. You know why? Because they have the freedom to have them.
Mm-hmm. I just don't understand why they're searching the home of the motherfucker of the victim.
Mm. You heard what the mother said, right?
Yo. What?
No, I mean, in the mother,
I didn't.
She was like the mother. They interviewed the mother when she addressed the police officer. She says, I wonder why the officers haven't done a toxicology report on
the shooter.
I wonder why they haven't searched the home of the shooter. I wonder why they haven't searched the car of the shooter.
Exactly.
And she started that by saying the call she received that day was worse than the call she received when they told her that her son was dead. Because she know her son hasn't done anything, and now y'all have gone to another level and started to smear his name. And in no criminal case ever is the victim the first person to be searched or have these things done. But I feel like this is one of them situations that really highlight just how different the law is for us.
Yeah. Like, how accidental is it you break into someone else's house and then shoot them, and because you said you thought it was yours? I've never walked into any spot and didn't know. Like I've never walked into my house thinking it wasn't my house. Or I've never been into a spot not knowing it. And trying to question whether it is my house or not. And I've stayed in apartment buildings. I've been in dorms. I've never done that. And I'm like, if you realize real quick that it's not your spot.
I guess
and like, who cares if he had drugs there? I don't care if the motherfucker had crystal meth in there.
A whole lab.
Yeah, I don't care. That nigga has a whole refrigerator lean. Like, it doesn't justify her breaking into his spot and shooting him.
Yeah, I mean, because you know what, that can be summed up with 2 words easily: search warrant. Yeah, like that is how the criminal justice system works. If he was doing any of the things we just mentioned, should he be in jail? Probably. But is there a due process for collecting evidence to prove that he's doing that for him to go to a court of law and be convicted for those crimes? Absolutely. Was he afforded that due process? Absolutely not. That is exactly what we're referring to. And it comes down to, and my other problem with that is, like, usually when people throw out a crime or say somebody had drugs or any of these things, my first question is, all right, so let's pull up the statute and the law against whatever you're saying the crime was. If the penalty for this crime is not death, they still were not afforded due process.
Right.
So, all right, I committed a robbery. What is the maximum penalty for robbery? If it's not the death penalty under the U.S. criminal justice system, then, could I been apprehended peacefully? If so, which we pretty much have proven can be. I mean, police apprehend people with weapons all the time. I just saw somebody apprehended that was jumping up and down on the top of a police car. And they waited and tackled him later. I've seen people snatch a police officer's gun and take off running. And did they get gunned down? No, they got tased and apprehended. Can it be done? Absolutely. Why? Because I know. Why? Because I've attended Flexi enough to know that they teach how to apprehend people peacefully. Yeah. Whether you choose to exercise this training and understanding that you can actually do so is another thing. So they can't lie to you and say that they've been trained to do that because you know that's patently false. Yeah, exactly. No officer on earth is trained to defer to lethal force first. And they're justifying doing so by saying their life was in danger. Even when somebody's reaching, even if you don't know what the object is, and yeah, you could absolutely be in duress, be fearful for your life. There's still mechanisms that are taught for you to apprehend this person without using lethal force. So you're literally making the choice not to do so, and you just so happen to be making the choice not to do so against a certain demographic. Yeah. And then whenever it happens, that demographic is always being held responsible for their own murder. Every single time. But man, you break into someone else's house. Man, he was unarmed, broke into the house, gunned his man there. And on top of that, like, I don't understand the manslaughter charge either. And as a person that is, 1, an avid gun owner, and 2, spends enough time at the range, and 3, has been more than adequately trained, I know that if I put multiple shots in the torso, I am not trying to wound you so that you live. I am trying to kill you. Yes. I just put multiple rounds into vital organs. Yeah. That is why usually, just saying, usually, not in every state even, but usually, in most states, if you shoot below the waist, it's not attempted murder. If you shoot above the waist, it is attempted murder. You might get assault with a deadly weapon. You might get manslaughter if they die. You might get a number of things if you shoot below the waist. But very rarely do you shoot somebody above the waist and get anything less than either attempted murder or murder. Right. And just like multiple lawyers and judges have pointed out in this specific case, it is rarely seen ever that somebody shoots somebody in the torso and gets manslaughter. That's crazy. But, there's the criminal justice system, and then there is the minority criminal justice system. I won't even limit it to black. I've seen it happen to others. So let's just make it all encompassing. There's the actual criminal justice system, and there's the criminal justice system that applies to us.